not just regionally. So I reluctantly, at this point, urge all members to oppose this amendment and will reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from Louisiana.
I would give 2 minutes to my colleague from Louisiana, Steve Scalise.
Gentleman from Louisiana is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank my colleague from New Orleans, Mr. Richmond, for bringing this amendment forward. And of course, what we're trying to do is just put an additional reform in place to make sure that when a cost-benefit analysis is done, it truly reflects the value of those projects, especially as we're talking about flood protection and hurricane reduction projects, in many cases where local governments are doing a lot of the work themselves to protect not only people and communities, but also vital energy infrastructure. And, of course, having the value of that infrastructure, as my colleague from New Orleans pointed out, even when we see a storm enter the Gulf of Mexico and as rigs in the Gulf are evacuated, we see immediate increases in the price of gasoline all across the country. So we ought to be encouraging those local communities to be building up and strengthening their flood protection, whether it's coastal restoration, something that our state of Louisiana has actually dedicated the lion's share of all of the offshore oil revenues our state will ultimately start getting in 2017, to make sure that that money is dedicated to restoring our coast, literally where you have the state putting hundreds of millions of dollars of its own money where its mouth is to protect those resources. But just as locals are doing that work, as the Corps is evaluating larger projects, federal projects, that would also protect that vital infrastructure, it's important that that calculation be made, because ultimately, if there is a storm or damage and that work's not done, then the economy will suffer. We've seen it suffer across the nation. I do want to mention, Mr. Chairman, that the American Petroleum Institute has come out in support of this amendment. It's a strong bipartisan amendment, and we appreciate the support of API, and obviously they understand the national importance of having this kind of reform in the bill. And with that, I would yield back to the gentleman from Louisiana.
Gentleman yields back his time. The gentleman from Pennsylvania.
I yield 1 minute to the ranking member of the committee, Mr. Rahal.
Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the chairman. Mr. Chairman, really, I really reluctantly oppose this amendment. Some concerns have been raised about how the changes proposed in this amendment would affect the current process by which the Corps calculates future costs and benefits of potential projects. The committee may need some additional time to better understand how these changes would be implemented and what the impact of project development would be. So therefore, I really reluctantly oppose this amendment.
Does the gentleman yield back?
I yield back to the chairman.
Gentleman yields back his time. Gentleman from Louisiana.
How much time do I have remaining?
1 minute and 30 seconds.
Mr. Chairman, and also what we included in here, which I think is very important and all of my colleagues should understand, is that when the Corps right now would evaluate a farm, they would just look at rebuilding the farmhouse, as opposed to the fact that you have millions and millions or hundreds of acres that produce goods every day for the nation. So we don't want the Corps to just look at bricks and mortars when, for example, you may have an interstate smack dab in the area that they're thinking about protecting, and that interstate may be an evacuation route. It may be Interstate 10, which goods and services come down. All we're saying is that the Corps should use common sense when they do their cost-benefit analysis and not just look at bricks and mortars, because to do a true economic impact or cost-benefit analysis, you have to get into the complexities of what the building, what the area has to offer. So we would say that our refineries, our Port of South Louisiana, our Port of New Orleans, are those types of things that you absolutely must protect, and you have to factor in the fact that they send billions and billions of dollars to the federal government every year in taxes. So we would not just lose the bricks and mortars, but the federal government would lose billions and billions of dollars. And we're saying to the Corps of Engineers that they should take that into account when they're doing their cost-benefit analysis. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I would just urge my colleagues to vote yes for the amendment, and I would yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The gentleman from Pennsylvania.
I share the ranking member's reluctance to oppose this because of my two friends from Louisiana have been formidable opponents on many occasions that I've come up on the short end. But in this case, I disagree respectfully with my colleagues that the Corps does look at the national implications, and there is no doubt that the Gulf Coast is the major producing region of energy in this country, so it should be in the, and it is in the Corps' calculation when they're looking at hurricane damage to the Gulf Coast, that what the impact is to the nation. So again, I reluctantly oppose this amendment this time because I just don't believe this is something that, to regionalize it, is going to be beneficial to the nation as a whole. So with that, I urge a no vote, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Louisiana. Those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask for a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Louisiana will be postponed. It's now in order to consider amendment number 24, printed in House Report 113-251. For what purpose does the gentleman from Colorado seek recognition?
In support of the amendment.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 24, printed in House Report number 113-251, offered by Mr. Gardner of Colorado.
Pursuant to House Resolution 385, the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Gardner, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Colorado.
I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I rise today in support of this amendment to the Water Resources Reform and Development Act, and I express my intention to withdraw this amendment at the end of my statement. This amendment authorizes the Secretary, acting through the Chief of Engineers, to designate a team to serve as the Office of Water Storage. The office is tasked with coordinating every agency involved in the approval of water storage permits, including the EPA, the Bureau of Reclamation, and the Department of Interior. Once initial applications are submitted to the Office of Water Storage, the office must, upon notification of the Governor, approve or deny a permit within 365 days. The amendment does not circumvent environmental laws, but merely sets a time frame for initial up or down decision to move forward. And the Congressional Budget Office stated that this amendment contains no direct spending. The amendment would seek to streamline the process for desperately needed water storage infrastructure, particularly in the western United States. Economic development, agriculture, job creation is directly correlated to each individual state's ability to deliver and store water. We can no longer rest on our current water storage infrastructure to meet the demands of both our agricultural and municipal water needs. In Colorado alone, by the year 2050, we will need an additional 1 million acre-feet of water to meet the needs of agriculture, industry, and our growing cities. Without that water, we will see a buy-up and dry-up of agricultural land and the destruction of our economy. To approve of these projects that have been tied up for decades in permitting battles, we need to rethink the federal government's role in water storage and redefine the various missions that agencies at the federal level are charged with in these permitting decisions. The federal government has created a litany of regulations and bureaucratic red tape that inhibit local communities and states from building new reservoirs and new water storage systems. And the result, as I said, will be a buy-up and dry-up of agricultural land if we fail to move forward with these permitted projects. The amendment puts control back in the hands of local water users, back in the hands of local governments, back in the hands of the governor of the state, and away from the bureaucracy of Washington, D.C. And I would like to continue to work on this issue with Chairman Schuster, appreciate his leadership, and certainly would love to continue working on this with the chairman.
The gentleman yields?
Yes, yield.
I thank my good friend from Colorado, and I understand your great passion for solving the water problems. We saw what happened after the massive fires in Colorado and the inability to stop the flooding from occurring because of the ground cover was swept away by those terrible fires. And I understand the need for Colorado in the future for having that water storage for your economic development and making sure that agriculture remains an important part of the economy in Colorado. So thanks for raising the issue, and I am committed to continue to work with you, as we have in the past, to try to address these water issues as we move forward.
I thank the chairman for his leadership on issues of national infrastructure, and with that, I withdraw my amendment and yield back, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Without objection, the amendment is withdrawn. Pursuant to Clause 6, Rule 18, proceedings now will resume on those amendments printed in House Report 113-251, on which further proceedings were postponed in the following order. Amendment number 2 by Mr. DeFazio of Oregon, Amendment number 3 by Mr. Flores of Texas, Amendment number 6 by Mr. Hastings of Florida, and Amendment number 16 by Mr. Richmond of Louisiana. The Chair will reduce to 2 minutes the minimum time for any electronic vote after the vote in the first series. The unfinished business is a request for a recorded vote on Amendment number 2 printed in the House Report 113-251 by the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. DeFazio, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 2, printed in House Report number 113-251, offered by Mr. DeFazio of Oregon.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 15-minute vote.
The House this afternoon has been debating a water resources bill which reauthorizes flood control, navigation, and environmental restoration projects. It also establishes a new process for determining which Army Corps of Engineers water resource projects move forward. 15-minute vote here on one of the several amendments that have been debated this afternoon. There were 100 submitted to the Rules Committee and 24 allowed for consideration. This is Peter DeFazio of Oregon. His amendment would delay provisions on streamlining environmental requirements. 15-minute vote on the House floor. And for some background on this bill and what's ahead in the Senate as well, we spoke to a Capitol Hill reporter. There is transportation reporter for Politico. How much does this water bill cost, and what type of projects are included in it?
Great. Well, thank you for having me. First off, there's one thing to note, which is this is just an authorization, that any sort of specific funding would have to come through appropriations bills down the road. That said, it does set up about $8.2 billion in spending over the next 10 years. It's for a number of port and inland waterway projects around the country, and the ports and rivers around the country.
What's the view of the Transportation Committee Chair, Bill Schuster, who introduced the bill? How confident is he that it will be passed in the House?
He's very confident, not only about that this will be passed in the House, but he's even come out and said he'd love to see a water bill passed every 2 years. This is something that Congress has not been very good about. The last one was in 2007. It had been a long time leading up to that one. So he's really trying to set a high mark, not only for House passage here, but then to have Congress do something every 2 years on future water bills.
Was he or other GOP leaders concerned at all that yesterday a number of conservative outside groups, including Heritage Action, called on members to vote against the bill?
There doesn't seem to be a lot of concern from leadership. This does have very strong bipartisan support. Democrats are in strong support. Nick Rahal and Tim Bishop, two of the top Democrats on the Transportation Committee dealing with this water bill, have said they're a big fan, and they've really appreciated the way Schuster has reached out to them and worked with them. So, and also keep in mind, Schuster is also a member of the Republican whip team, so he's sort of working this from both sides. So they seem to be definitely very confident about this passage.
Well, the Rules Committee yesterday whittled down some 100 amendments to 24. What are some of the key ones we should look out for?
There was one that was ruled out of order that's a little notable, that would have allowed guns on Army Corps land. We saw that in a previous transportation bill with Amtrak. There's a vote on that. There's a couple that are in order. There's one from Kerry Bentivolio that would boost the amount of deauthorized projects. This bill sort of deauthorizes some of the old projects. It would vastly increase that from about $12 billion to $35 billion. And there's another notable one that's definitely one to watch. It's from 5 of the top Democrats on the committee, including Peter DeFazio, and that one would basically delay the bill's streamlining provisions until the backlog of projects, which is currently about $60 billion until that's whittled all the way down to $20 billion. So you can imagine that would definitely have a delaying effect on some of these streamlining provisions in the bill.
This water bill is the kind of bill that in the past might have been laden with member earmarks. What's changed to make that so we don't see those anymore?
Right. Well, the bills do list some specific projects. They do comply with the earmark ban. That was one very easy way to secure a lot of votes in the past, was through earmarks. It's something that the committees have struggled with this time around, and they basically set up a process for these projects to be approved, that if they meet certain criteria, certain environmental reports and things like that, then they'll be approved. Army Corps obviously has to weigh in as well. And again, the goal is to go back and do this every 2 years, so there aren't this big backlog of projects, and it's something that they can revisit every 2 years.
Well, the Senate passed its version in May. Assuming passage in the House, what's ahead in the conference? What are some of the key issues that have to be worked out between the two measures?
Well, right, you have a good point. A lot of people, assuming House passage here, they're definitely looking forward to the House-Senate conference. Both chambers have made this a big priority. It was one of the first bills the Senate did. Barbara Boxer and David Vitter on the EPW committee in the Senate have been big proponents of this. There are definitely some differences on some of the pilot provisions as far as innovative finance. The bill's overall price tags are different. The Senate's a few billion dollars more expensive because it authorizes a few more projects. And in conference, also, we never know when some of this conservative outrage against the quote, Kentucky kickback, the Olmsted Locks and Dam project, we never know when that will crop back up and maybe complicate a conference.
Follow Adam Snyder on Twitter at Adam K. Snyder and read his reporting at Politico.com. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And that Bentivolio amendment by Representative Bentivolio of Michigan, which would increase the backlog projects to be deauthorized from $12 billion to $35 billion, that amendment failed on a voice vote. The House is voting on amendments to the Water Resources Bill. 15-minute vote here on the first amendment to be voted upon by Peter DeFazio of Oregon. It's a 15-minute vote. All of the following votes will be 2-minute votes. Coming up tomorrow, the House Energy and Commerce Committee takes up the first of several hearings looking at the implementation of the health care law. That hearing tomorrow at 9 o'clock Eastern. That'll be live here on C-SPAN as the House is not in session. But lots of talk about that law and its implementation, both on Capitol Hill and the White House. Press Secretary Jay Carney said in his briefing today the President was not made aware of the health care website problems before the launch on October 1st. Here's some of what he had to say.
Secretary Sebelius on CNN yesterday said that the President was not aware of any of the problems with the healthcare.gov website before it launched. And we've come to find out since then that there were a bunch of red flags that had cropped up before launch. And so I'm wondering whether the President feels now that he should have been made aware of that. Should somebody be held accountable for giving him that information? And if there was somebody giving him information, was he in fact misinformed about the status of the launch?
Jim, thank you for that question. Secretary Sebelius was referring to what I have said and what the President himself has said, which is that while we knew that there would be some glitches and actually said publicly that we expected some problems, we did not know until the problems manifested themselves after the launch that they would be as significant as they have turned out to be. So, you know, there was testing and there were some problems anticipated, but we did not expect, and by we I mean broadly, the administration did not expect the scale of problems that we have seen, which is why, at the President's direction and the Secretary's direction, we have launched this all-out effort, 24/7, with a tech surge of experts, new eyes and ears coming in to assist the existing team to identify and isolate each problem that exists with the functionality of the website, assess what the best solutions are to creating a remedy for that specific problem, and then applying it, whether it's increasing server capacity or writing new code to work around a situation providing greater accessibility for improvements in the user interface. These are all things that the teams currently operating and working on making improvements to the system are focusing on, and they're tackling the problems one by one. They're prioritizing them, and they're addressing them. These are technical, logistical problems that require the kind of expertise that's being brought to bear to fix them. But there is no question that we did not anticipate the scale of the problems with the website. What is also important to remember is that the website is not the Affordable Care Act. What has been in place since October 1st and what will be in place for the millions of consumers who want the product is the vast array of affordable health plans out there because of the marketplaces set up by the Affordable Care Act. And every day, more and more Americans are submitting applications, they're enrolling, they're shopping, and they're finding out that they have access to affordable health insurance. And if they're among the 15 to 20% of the American people who did not have insurance in the past, they're discovering that they have options available to them that make it affordable and that will provide them, come January 1st, security that they've lacked in the past. And while the struggles that individuals have had with the website are extremely unfortunate, and we take responsibility for them, and we are working around the clock to fix the website to make that experience easier. Those struggles, as I said yesterday, pale in comparison to the uncertainty that a single mom who's a breast cancer survivor has felt every day that she's lacked insurance because she can't afford it. She's been priced out of it, or insurers simply won't give it to her because she has a pre-existing condition. And that is why we have to keep focused on the end goal here, which is making this insurance available to millions of Americans who need it.
And back live on the House floor, the first of several amendment votes on the Water Resources Bill. On the issue of health care, Meredith Shiner of Roll Call is reporting that Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia, in a preliminary move that could jam his own politically vulnerable colleagues, is working on a bill to delay the individual mandate by a year. His office confirmed today. Republican Marco Rubio of Florida is working on legislation to delay the mandate indefinitely, which Manchin's office says the senator does not support, and it's entirely possible the GOP could push for a delay provision to be included as an amendment vote to the next moving vehicle in the U.S. Senate. The Senate is out this week in recess. The House will be done as of today for the week. Many members attending tomorrow the funeral of the late Bill Young, who died last week in Florida. He had been the longest-serving Republican member of the House to that date. He was 82 years old and passed away last week. And also today on the issue of health care was part of the conversation with the Republican leadership. John Boehner, the House Speaker, and other Republican leaders talked to reporters for about 15 minutes about health care and the website and also this week's jobless numbers.
Morning, everyone. You know, we had another jobs report yesterday, another, frankly, disappointing jobs report. This economy is not creating the jobs that the American people are looking for. Their wages are stagnant. And part of the problem is that we've got the whole threat of Obamacare continuing to hang over our economy like a wet blanket. Employers scared to death in terms of what they have to do and what they don't have to do, afraid to add new employees. And, you know, when you look at the problems with Obamacare, all the focus here lately has been on the website. Clearly, there's problems with the website. But I would argue that the problems go much further than that. How about the report over the last couple of days of the hundreds of thousands of Americans who are finding out that they're going to lose their coverage because the plans they have today don't qualify under Obamacare. And when you begin to look at these hundreds of thousands of people, I think what you're going to see at the end of October are more Americans are going to lose their health insurance than are going to sign up at these exchanges. This is a very serious problem. It's affecting our economy, and it's affecting the ability of the American people to find the job that will help them take care of themselves and their families.
Good morning. The rollout of Obamacare is nothing short of a debacle. And the American people are now fearful of their health care. I mean, they're downright scared about what's going to happen with their health care next year. And all we're hearing from the administration really is really unsatisfactory in terms of answers to the many, many unanswered questions. Yes, we all know the website doesn't work, and the administration keeps saying, well, just to the subscribers who want to go on, say go and try again. Well, again, there's so many unanswered questions that is adding to the fear of so many American people. And what's not helping is a lack of transparency on the part of this administration. This morning, I know that HHS officials will be up briefing the Democratic caucus. No intention initially to say that they were going to brief Republicans on what's going on. Last night we learned that federal officials asked insurers not to release numbers for the exchanges in terms of sign-ups. We still don't know these enrollment numbers. And HHS is blocking third-party verified traffic data. This is not transparency, and this is adding to the confusion and the fears surrounding the rollout of Obamacare. Now, in a couple of months, the Obamacare mandate tax is going to kick in, and many Americans are going to have to pay as much as 1% of their income to the federal government if they don't sign up on Obamacare. So how is that fair? I mean, with so many unanswered questions and the problems arising around this rollout, it doesn't make any sense to impose this 1% mandate tax on the American people. And that's why we Republicans remain committed to delaying that mandate tax of Obamacare so that finally we can get the answers that so many people are seeking, and we can try and reassure the millions of Americans who are growing in their fear about what this all means for their health care.
You know, it's another day and a new glitch for the Obamacare rollout. So while only 12% of Americans, the latest CBS poll, says that it's going well, more than half believe it's not. But as I listened to the President do a press conference that we will handle it, we will fix it, it just rings back to the moment when he was proposing Obamacare and said if you had your health care and you liked it, you can keep it. It's not a glitch when an American citizen receives a letter and says their current health care, they will no longer have it. Many of the constituents that I have that I come out and see, the frustration that it is not fair in the process, that they don't have the health care that they can keep it, and if they go onto a website, they cannot see what they can have now. So when you look back and you look at the arguments, the complaints, the transparency and the accountability that we've asked for, none of that goes away. I think the focus will now be on where is the accountability in the process and where are the answers.
Moms, dads, seniors, young people continue to struggle all across this country, whether it is those that are out of work trying to find a job and the economy that continues to struggle, or those that are trying to get health insurance, are losing their health insurance, or having trouble getting their health insurance. As leaders here in Congress, our commitment is to continue to work on issues that are going to create jobs, that are going to create opportunities, and also ensure that people do have access to quality and affordable health care. The concerns are coming in every day right now, and the concern that actually this health care law is going to make it harder for people, it's actually going to make it worse for more people than it's going to help. And that's why we're launching the www.gop.gov Your Story, to have people all across this country share their story dealing with the new health care law, so that we can go to work to ensure that moving forward we can take the action to help individuals, give them the protections that they need with this law. The delay of the individual mandate, the tax, the fee that they are facing, that employers have been given a pass on, we need to provide that fairness to individuals and families all across this country.
Conan said the other night, Obama is now urging Americans having trouble with the website to call 1-800 number. The 1-800 number is 1-800. We didn't think this through. Whether it's Fallon or Conan or Jon Stewart, Saturday Night Live, all of the jokes go on and on and on. But nothing is funny about losing your health care plan when you already had what you liked and you wanted to keep it. Nothing's funny about being forced on a website that doesn't work to buy health insurance that you don't want and can't afford. And it's even less funny when a government tax is hanging over your head and you don't have hours on end to go through the whole circus. This Obamacare exchange has been a complete and total failure, and it's unacceptable. The American people deserve better.
Good morning. I'm Congressman Tim Murphy of Pennsylvania, Chairman of the House Energy and Commerce Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigation. Tomorrow we're going to have a hearing about the exchange website, and it'll be about the facts. We're approaching this investigation in a thoughtful and deliberate way. Here's what we know so far. HHS budgeted $55 million for just one company to build the website. Less than a year in, the agency had spent $93 million and then has since frittered away $300 million. In addition, other companies were hired to work on this website, and all told, more than $500 million was spent on a website that just doesn't work. The Energy and Commerce Committees will be real working hearings continuing our ongoing investigation into what went wrong and getting answers on the record, first with the contractors and next week with Secretary Sebelius. Repeatedly, over the last year, our committee and subcommittee was told by numerous administrative officials, don't worry, everything is fine, we have this under control. We know that that simply was not the case. Either they didn't know what was going on in their own offices, or they were deliberately misleading us and the American people with the hope of avoiding us from knowing what was really happening. Given all these questions, we should press pause on this President's tech surge where he wants to spend untold more amounts of money to throw that after a bad website when we don't really know if this one is even salvageable. This tech surge is comparable to trying to fix a car by overhauling it while it's still rolling down the highway. At some point you have to decide, can it be fixed or do we scrap this and get a new one? If 55 different contractors could not successfully build, test, and run a website in 3 years at a total cost of over $500 million, why should we believe the administration is capable of fixing it in 2 weeks, especially with someone who doesn't even have tech experience? With these hearings, we're going to find out. Did the breakdowns occur with the IT contractors, or were they told to do it this way by HHS? Did the outside contractors notify HHS when there were problems? How many people have been able to sign up using the website? Are they even capable of knowing how it's working? Was the site designed poorly because the White House sought to hide it from the public and hide the massive premium increases families are seeing? And why has the President tapped an individual to fix a technology problem without any technology problem experience? While we work to get the answers, we are deeply concerned about the number of Americans who are being told they will no longer have insurance. They're looking to this as an answer, and throughout the initial rollout of this, when Congress was voting on this, and it was we were pushed away from being able to work on this, we were told repeatedly that this website would be a wonder, that people would be able to look at it, compare policies, and make thoughtful and informed decisions about what's going on. Well, we still wonder what's going on and wonder why the American people cannot possibly make thoughtful, informed decisions about their insurance, and they're quite frightened. Thank you.
Senator.
Speaker, you have done many, many efforts in the House to repeal Obamacare. We know what happened with the efforts to defund Obamacare. Now that Americans are waking up to the issues here, do you think you have a better environment to do something? And what is the specific legislative strategy at this point?
Well, I think the biggest part of Congress's job is to provide proper oversight of the executive branch of government. And whether it's Obamacare or issues over at the Department of Defense, it's our job to hold them accountable. And when it comes to Obamacare, clearly there's an awful lot that needs to be held accountable.
Speaker Boehner, your friend Bill Kristol said on Morning Joe this morning that Paul Ryan would unveil the House GOP plan for health care reform sometime in January. Is it your understanding that that's going to happen, and can you give us an idea of what it might look like?
I'll let you talk to Paul about that.
But will it happen? Last question.
McConnell said defund was a tactical error and not smart. Do you agree with that? Listen, we went through a very tough period. As I told my colleagues the other day, we fought the fight. We didn't win. We lived to fight another day. And the fact is that we're going to have issues about funding the government come January 15th. We're going to have the debt ceiling we're going to have to deal with again. The looming problems that are affecting our country are still there. We are spending more than what we bring in, to the tune of $700 billion this year alone, even though we've got record income. And so the problems are looming. It's time for Washington to deal with the serious problems affecting our country.
Mr. Speaker, there's a couple of legislative weeks left in the year. Do you plan to bring up immigration legislation?
I still think immigration reform is an important subject that needs to be addressed, and I'm hopeful.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Boehner, as you know, your party took quite a beating after the shutdown in the polls, and you did personally. You just came from a meeting with your members. How concerned are they, and how concerned are you about potentially losing the House?
Listen, I think as long as we stay focused on the priorities of the American people, I think we're going to be fine. What are they concerned about? They're concerned about their jobs. They're concerned about their income. They're concerned about their own health insurance and how they're going to be able to afford it and how they're going to navigate through this bizarre plan that they now have to deal with. And so our job is to stay focused on the issues the American people are most concerned about, and if we do that, we'll be just fine. Thanks, everybody.
And just a reminder, the House Energy and Commerce Committee holds a hearing tomorrow on the implementation of the health care law. They will hear from several of the health care law's top contractors to try to understand the problems with the website and other issues with the implementation of the law. We'll have live coverage of that hearing, expected to last some 5 hours. It begins at 9 a.m. Eastern. That will be live here on C-SPAN. The U.S. House not coming in tomorrow. Many of the members attending the funeral of the late Bill Young, who passed last week at the age of 82 in Florida.
Mrs. Lowy. Mrs. Lowy votes aye.
On this vote, the yeas are 183, the nays are 236. The amendment is not agreed to. We have order in the House. We have order in the committee. All members asked to take their seats. All members take their seats. Members are asked to clear the well. The committee will be in order. Members will take their seats. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to speak out of order for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in honor of 241 service members who were killed 30 years ago in the attacks by Hezbollah against the U.S. Marine compound in Beirut. Now, I was not stationed in Beirut during the attack, but this was my former battalion, 1st Battalion, 8th Marines. Until 9/11, this was the deadliest terrorist attack against Americans in our nation's history, and in many ways was the beginning of the war on terror that we are still fighting today. Mr. Speaker, I now ask my colleagues to rise and observe a member of silence in honor of the sacrifice of 241 Americans, which were 220 Marines, 18 sailors, and 3 soldiers who were lost 30 years ago today.
Will all members present please rise for a moment of silence?
Thank you.
Without objection, 2-minute voting will continue. The unfinished business is a request for a recorded vote on amendment number 3, printed in the House Report 113-251 by the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Flores, on which the further proceedings were postponed and on which the ayes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 3, printed in House Report number 113-251, offered by Mr. Flores of Texas.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
A moment of silence on the House floor, remembering 30 years ago, October 23, 1983, the terrorist attack on Marine barracks in Beirut, Lebanon, killing some 300 Americans. On with amendment votes, Bill Flores of Texas, Republican of Texas, with an amendment to the water bill, which would block the implementation of parts of the task force report that resulted from the Gulf oil spill of a couple of years ago. The underlying legislation, the Water Resources Bill, reauthorizes Corps of Engineer projects, flood control, navigation, and environmental restoration projects.
On this vote, the yeas are 225, the nays are 193. The amendment is agreed to. The unfinished business is a request for a recorded vote on amendment number 6, printed in House Report 113-251 by the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Hastings, on which further proceedings were postponed, on which the nays prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 6, printed in House Report number 113-251, offered by Mr. Hastings of Florida.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of a request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
Democrat Alcee Hastings of Florida with an amendment to the Water Resources Bill that would include operation and maintenance costs associated with sand transfer plants in the annual operations and maintenance budget of the Army Corps of Engineers. It's a 2-minute vote. This will be the last bit of legislative work for the House this week. They are out tomorrow, other than a pro forma session tomorrow at noon. Many members attending the funeral of the late Bill Young of Florida. He died last week at the age of 82. The Senate has been in recess this week. They'll reconvene Monday, 2 p.m. Eastern. At 5:30 on Monday the 28th, they will have a vote on a motion to limit debate on the nomination of Richard Griffin to be the general counsel at the National Labor Relations Board. Also next week in the U.S. Senate, Senator-elect Cory Booker of New Jersey will be sworn in as senator. Next Thursday, a week from tomorrow, his campaign announced today. The Washington Post writes that Vice President Biden will swear Booker in at noon that day. He will become the first African-American to represent New Jersey in the U.S. Senate.
On this vote, the yeas are 133, the nays are 287. The amendment is not agreed to. The unfinished business is a request for recorded vote on amendment number 16, printed in House Report 113-251 by the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Richmond, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 16, printed in House Report number 113-251, offered by Mr. Richmond of Louisiana.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient numbering having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their device by electronic device. Record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
Cedric Richmond, Democrat of Louisiana, and Steve Scalise, Republican of Louisiana, with an amendment that would call on the Corps of Engineers to include local economic losses and evacuation routes in reports on the benefit of water projects. This is the last amendment vote. Final passage on the Water Resources Bill is next, and the House gavels out for the week, though they are in tomorrow for a pro forma session. Also in tomorrow, a couple of House committees, including the House Energy and Commerce Committee, holding a hearing tomorrow on the implementation of the Affordable Care Act. They will hear from several of the health care law's government contractors testifying at the hearing tomorrow in an effort to understand the problems with the website and the implementation of the law in general. That'll be live tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Eastern here on C-SPAN.
On this vote, the yeas are 237, the nays are 183. The amendment is agreed to. The question is on the amendment in the nature of substituted as amended. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The amendment is adopted. Accordingly, under the rule, the committee rises.
Right here.
Chairman, the chair of the committee.
Okay, Mr. Chairman.
The Committee of the Whole House of the State of the Union has under consideration